All right, so we are back, and it is 6:47 p.m. So we are going to move right into item 6, which is student board member reports. Our student board members actually have a presentation tonight. This is their final meeting of this year, academic year, and they want to give a presentation about, well, they can explain what it's about.
Okay, good evening, board. This is on. Okay. So, okay, as Kaylin said, we're going to be giving a presentation tonight. So basically, I've been here for 2 years as a student board member, and in this time, we've collected a lot of feedback. This is CUHSD's first full year, and tonight we'd like to take the opportunity to share what we've learned from the students, and so we're just going to go through that now. So we'll start off just with our agenda for the presentation. We're going to begin by discussing our student board member goals for the school year, and then we're going to go into 3 areas that we found most impact students' high school experience and kind of break those down in the ways that it can positively and negatively impact their experience. We'll talk about our future plans for the student board position, and then we will offer our overall takeaways for the board and have some time for questions at the end.
So to begin, we're going to be talking about our goals for this school year. And so one of our main foci was providing our student perspective. And so we did this through 6 different methods. So first of all, we attended the bi-monthly board meetings and we gave our school reports. We attended board workshops where we gave our opinions on the issues that were being discussed. We gave opinions on board policies, specifically the educational and grading policy. We created one mass district survey, the athletic participation in LGBTQ survey. We engaged in interviews with the prospect principal and student board members, and we gave our opinion on the vision and mission statements.
So our second main goal for this school year was to increase the general understanding that students have of the student board member position as well as district processes in general. And we did that through creating a video that was played at every single campus during the tutorial. We also created an Instagram page that we update with our activities. And we also created a contact us page on the CUHSD website.
And one of our last goals was to provide a feedback and communication outlet for other students. And so we attended the president council meetings for ASB presidents. We attended 2. We created the CUHSD Student Voices Instagram page to allow students to directly message us regarding issues. There's the Contact Us page on our district website. And of course, we attended all the campuses in our campus visits.
And so in these campus visits, we met with focus groups at every campus of about 15 students from a diverse background, and we asked them more specific questions to get more feedback. And the rest of our presentation is going to focus on that feedback that we've gotten from all those campuses. And based on what students told us, we kind of determined 3 main areas that are most impactful on student experience. So we're going to go through those one by one.
So within the first strand, we see student support. We identified 3 main strands within this: targeted education, people of color and LGBTQ education, and staff-based solutions. So within the first strand, we see 2 subdivisions for bullying and mental health education and mentorship for ELL students, which is English language learner students. So throughout our campus visits, many students talked about, and this is in reference to bullying and mental health education, they talked about how their physical education classes were the only classes that really had an overview of bullying and mental health education, and throughout the rest of their classes, they didn't see any representation of this sort of education, and so this was one of the main things that a lot of students talked about, whereas they would want to see an increase in the amount of education regarding these 2 aspects. And secondly was the mentorship for ELL students. Through our campus visits, many ELL students talked about how they would want a mentorship program in which an older student would be able to help them navigate the intricacies of high school, as they would already have a pre-made social circle in which there wouldn't be a language barrier.
So along with this education aspect, We also heard a lot about the need to increase the inclusivity of our education to represent people of color and the LGBT community. An anecdote I always share is that from my personal high school experience, in 4 years of an advanced placement in honors English, I read 17 books by white men and a single book by a woman of color, and that too only because our teacher went out of her way and bought copies for every single student. So basically, students aren't seeing themselves in the curriculum that they're learning, and they're not given that confidence and that representation that really are their tools to know that they can create whatever future that they want. And that's something that the board really focused on when we were crafting our vision and mission statement, and is currently missing in our curriculum. The third strand for student support is the staff-based solutions. The main way we heard this come up with students was through guidance counselors. Students felt that their guidance counselors need to be more accessible, they need to have better communication with students, and that they want the guidance counselors to reach out to the students as opposed to the students doing the most work to form that connection. And this focus on the guidance counselors told us that students just have a general feeling of not having the support that they need, whether that be course selection or college preparation, or just general high school support. So this kind of leads to those stress levels that students have when they don't feel like they know that they can turn to someone or have that support. And we think that's very important that that's addressed. Along with that, students feel like they could be getting more support from their teachers in that they don't always get through all the content in their classes, or they don't spend enough time on certain content so that students don't feel set up for success academically. And they'd also wish that teachers could be more understanding of different student commitments and needs that they're juggling in their high school experience.
So giving the students the tools for success really carries over to many other aspects. And so the implementation of the best parts of student support we saw in Boynton. And so we have 3 different strands here which all interconnect, which all relate to basically the low faculty to student ratio. And so we see when we visited the campus, we saw that many students felt that they were supported by their teachers because they had enough access to their guidance counselors and their teachers on a daily basis, in which they felt comfortable enough to talk about whatever issues that they had. And this kind of plays in part due to the low faculty to student ratio. So it plays into having more teachers and more guidance counselors for the students. And so the quality relationships that they formed also made the students feel as if they were ready to face the future. And when leaving Boynton, they felt like they had the tools to really take on whatever they would want to in their future.
So our next main area of impact is campus culture. And one of the main areas of growth that we saw in campus culture is the relationships that students have with administration and with teachers. Speaking first to administration, there is a serious disconnect between those two groups. And students feel as if there's no trust on either end. Students don't feel like they can trust their administration, and they feel as if their administration is almost targeting certain students, either by race or by previous record. We've heard students tell us that the administration, the places they stand on campus are based on where certain racial groups hang out. Or that once you make a mistake once, they feel like they're being labeled, and that kind of gets them stuck in this cycle of repeatedly getting in trouble, where had they been given the support or had a stronger relationship with their administration, that might not have happened. We also heard a story from a student who told us about a time that they had a panic attack in class, and their teacher responded by sending them to the office, where an administrator just kept telling them to calm down and to stop crying, and none of those things are helpful for a student that's having a panic attack. And so that kind of highlighted the need for our administration to have a better education on students' mental health needs and how to respond to that and how to support students through that. For teacher relationships, students felt like certain teachers would kind of give up on students. They might judge them by their stereotypes or by certain behavior and assume that they don't really deserve the same amount of support as other students. And we heard students tell us that, you know, if those kids had gotten just that little small sense of support from their teachers, that would have pushed them in the right direction. But instead, those students gave up because they felt like they weren't being supported from anyone, and the teachers are some of the most important support you get. And all of this ties into the unconscious bias that's present in our interactions. We heard at certain campuses how slurs such as the N-word or the F slur are very common. They're thrown around, and even students are even saying these to teachers. And the biggest concern that students saw was that the administration and the teachers are not addressing this. And because they're allowing this to happen, it normalizes the behavior and creates a culture where students think it's okay to act like that. We also have heard about, honestly, horror stories between teachers and student interactions. We've heard about teachers implicitly outing students that are members of the LGBT community to their class, or about teachers making fun of students for their body hair, all of which is really inappropriate and is very offensive. So it's these very explicit things as well as the more implicit or less noticeable things like heteronormative or gender exclusive language that we really feel like needs to be addressed with the student-teacher relationships in order to create a more accepting and inclusive environment for the students to feel safe in.
However, that isn't to say that there is only negatives in this aspect. To highlight a specific school in which we saw a really warm and inclusive environment, was Branham. When we attended Branham, all the students there were extremely happy and content with what was going on within their school and whatever decisions that their school and the district was taking in regards to their education. We saw a lot of the students citing specifically how the administration or the teachers would stand out on the crosswalks and greet students as they walked in from school, creating this sort of relationship, this very basic relationship between the students and staff in which they felt like they were being supported even at the most basic level. And so this builds upon students' desires for success as when they feel as if the environment in which they're learning is very safe and everybody's out to support them, they will obviously look to further their education.
And Tycoon touched on some of the different things that made the culture more accepting and safe, and we also noticed another area that we think kind of contributed to that was the Best Buddies program that's present on Branham, because it's a program that really promotes understanding and acceptance of others, and we think that spread into the rest of the environment. So that's one suggestion that we have for the board. If there's other opportunities to imitate similar programs on other campuses, that would be really great in order to improve the climate at each campus.
And so to tie it back in, we have the last strand, which is communication. And so one of the primary things that we noticed when we talked to students during our school visits was that many students felt like they didn't have an outlet in order to express their views and not only express their views, but also receive a response from the administration or from the district or from someone who is in charge. And so this further led students believe that their voices and opinions are not being considered. And so one of the main things we would want to see is some sort of student feedback loop in which students could express their concerns or what they like about the schools and could receive a response in return, which would help students feel supported in their education.
And some main areas that we see that this feedback loop really needs to be established for is mental health protocol and bullying and harassment protocol. Even within one of the focus groups that we were at, I had a student ask us, what can I do if I'm concerned about one of my friends who's suicidal? And that's something that we'd hope is already in place and students are already aware of. But those systems of communication need to be better established and better publicized to students so that they're effectively used. We've also had students ask how they can report teacher bias or how they can give feedback on school events or any other concern that comes up. So we think it's very important that we focus on this area because that's what allows students to feel like their voice is not only heard but valued.
And so before we get to the overall takeaways that we get from this and overall suggestions for what should be done, we're going to talk about the future planning, so what the other board member and I will look to do along with other things. And so the main things that we want to continue are the school visits, and we would have 2 per year this time. So we would do it once in the first semester and once in the last semester, and so we could have a presentation that shows the change in students' opinions over the course of the entire year, which would be a little bit more dynamic. Secondly, we want to improve communication between our schools in terms of students' opinions, and so we would likely form some sort of advisory council or some way where students could meet within their own schools and maybe report out back to us, the student board members, and that's still going to be talked about and figured out. We also want to continue to improve the understanding of the board for the students. And so we would continue to advertise what the board does, what we do through our social media page. And we would also want to keep updating our student board member page on the website. And lastly, meeting with other student board members from other districts is one of our big goals. And so we would also want to attend one of the conferences for the student board members next year.
And speaking of future planning, I'd just like to take a second. Tycoon mentioned, and we already know Tycoon is going to be continuing as one of our student board members next year. Our other student board member for the new school year is also actually present in the room. We have Clarabelle Walkup over here. So these two will be spearheading all those plans that we've made. And then we just want to conclude with a couple of overall takeaways for the board. So we saw that from our student feedback, in order to improve student experiences, there's kind of four main things that we've heard: that we need to improve the relationships on campus that students have with teachers and administration, that we need to establish and publicize a two-way feedback loop, that we need to expand our education inclusivity to represent people of color and the LGBT community, and that we need to establish an accepting campus culture. And from all of this, what I think we've really learned, and our main takeaway for the board, is that this feedback has showed us that moving forward, that the board needs to seek out and understand diverse student perspectives, because there's a lot of student voice that's currently missing from the board's consideration. And as it stands, the board is not representing all students, and consequently, the needs of our students aren't being met. So this presentation is just the tip of the iceberg for all the work that we need to do to better represent our students. And with that, we'd love to answer any questions that you have.
Board, questions, reflections?
Well, it's a terrific presentation. And, it saddens me to hear about some of these, the way that students are experiencing our schools. It really does. And I like the plans about establishing some more two-way communications. What I'm hoping next year with our new team of student board members is that we can get even more data to the board, more surveys and things like that. There's a student at Prospect, a freshman at Prospect, who took it upon herself after some discussions at the PTSA meeting to do some surveys about an issue that the parents and the teachers and the students were complaining about at the meeting, and she went out to go out and see, well, what does everybody think about that? She did a really terrific job, kind of pulling together a lot of information. It was very interesting when they reviewed it to kind of hear what the broader audience felt. So I'm hoping what I learned from that is that Matthew Dean is not the only stats guru in the district, but I think students have an innate ability to use the technology that's available and to be able to get your peers to provide feedback in a safe manner. And I would welcome the opportunity to hear more of that throughout the year. So I thank you for that. And I think I'm going to stop at this point because I might start to cry.
I was listening to you and not looking at the screen. Everything that you covered with us verbally, is it in writing in your presentation? Or was there a lot that was layered onto the prompts on the screen?
It was a lot of it was layered on.
Layered on. It's an extra burden to ask of you, but if you could commit to paper some of that layering, I really would like the board to look at your presentation in depth at our next workshop, so,
Yeah, we
Just
can
to-
get that to you.
all right, thank you.
President Gallagher? Can I appreciate very deeply the presentation since the magic of video is captured. And it's my intention to work with the principals so that this presentation is widely viewed throughout the district.
So a couple things. One, bigger fonts, please. Use that in college. It's a useful tool, so I just thought I'd pass that along. One of the things that concerns me, because what you bring up are serious issues, they're important. But I also am concerned about an expectation gap. You've grown up in a world where you have instantaneous contact with your friends via instant messenger, Snapchat, Instagram, etc. You may not know or understand what it's like to be an adult, where you have a full-time job, you have a house to run, you have kids to raise, and there's a whole series of things that draw on your time. So I just want us as a district to be mindful that the expectation of instant communication may be a little bit misguided to a certain extent, because teachers have a very complex job that they work very hard at, and they have a family, and they may have their own kids in school and need to work with their homework. So it's going to be a balance to try to find a good medium that works. But the expectation set of today's generation is boom, instantaneous. And so just be mindful of that as you go forward, because that's something that you'll struggle with as the next generation comes through. And heck, it may be psychic connections that you're not plugged into. So I think that's one thing that we have to balance. The bullying and harassment issues, that's a lifelong battle, and we absolutely need to fight that on every avenue. It's wrong on its face. There's no right time for it. And so we have to, that's a very important thing to quash. The other thing I would suggest is that when people have feelings, we have to own our feelings. And having raised 5 kids, one of the things I've tried to teach them is that if someone calls you a name or tells you, and I'll use my son as example, he was upset because someone was telling him he was fat. He's in 8th grade at Monroe Middle School. And I love my kids, and I looked at him and I said, so what's the problem? He says, well, that's not very nice. I said, well, go look at the BMI chart, do the math. You are round, son. I love you dearly, but you're round. And mom and I aren't holding you down, putting garbage in your mouth. We provide a balanced nutritional diet. You're the one buying with your own money all your snacks, etc. So I said, you have an opportunity to change that. But it's also one of perception, too. Because what that kid could be saying in a very clumsy way is that you ought to consider managing your health. So I try to teach my kids that when someone told you something you didn't like, to look for what was the nugget, what was the gem that you could take out of that clumsy, awkward, maybe mean, vicious, that might be that diamond that you could then learn from and grow. Because those diamonds are in there at times. And if it's really a friend, they're actually trying to help you. And if they're not really a friend, they're not trying to help you, and letting them affect you actually lets them win. So there's a balance in how we choose to respond to things. But in a general sense, we need to continue to teach all of our students, our peers, our working peers, respect for the individuals. It's okay to disagree, do it respectfully, and work through it. Keep the dialogue going. Just because someone's different, that's part of the beauty of the world, is the differences. I mean, if you've traveled around the world, I haven't been to any place that I don't think is beautiful in its own right, but I have to see the beauty in the place I go to and not bring my expectations of the beauty from where I came. And so you have to have that open mind and that mindset to enjoy it. So I think what you guys have brought, I love the presentation. I think there's a lot of power in that, and I think we've taken some very good first steps. There's a lifelong, multi-generational road to go down. And thank you for beginning that journey.
Yeah, I'd like to respond a little bit because you mentioned two things, communication and about the harassment. I'm going to start with the harassment just because, the anecdote you gave is important, but the issues we're more concerned about, when you're called the N-word, there's no diamond in that. And there's no justification. And it's not comparable to being mentioned, your weight being mentioned, because we're talking about a system that oppresses a group of people, and the N-word holds that power. Being called the N-word gets black students killed. Being called the N-word gets students to not get jobs, not have opportunities. So the bullying and the harassment and the bias we're talking about is a lot more serious, and it's being completely unrecognized. We had a student that was in our focus group, and she was just so overwhelmed and she didn't know what to do because, students are calling her the N-word to her face, and she can't get mad, she can't cry, because when she does those things, they say, why are you crying? Why are you reacting like this? There's no diamond in that. There is danger in that. There is oppression in that. And that needs to be recognized, and the board needs to hear that. And the board needs to be acknowledging those greater issues, because this isn't about, improving a little bit. This isn't about us having too high expectations. This is about us saying we're so far below basic humanity in some aspects of our interactions. And we need to start that struggle up to that basic level 0.
Thank you. One thing I do a lot is I play basketball. The number one set of people using that word are not Caucasian, and they use it frequently, and it always startles me.
Okay, let's not go into
Okay,
that.
all right, no, let's not get into that. I think the takeaway here is that when we allow that to happen, we allow that to become the norm. And that is what we need to address. And I totally agree with you. And I think, well, I won't speak for Mr. Dean, but I think his intent is there. I think, Matthew looks at things through a different lens, and that's all he was expressing.
And I understand that. And as I mentioned earlier, I urge the board to start looking outside your own lens, because good intent is not enough for our students. Good intent doesn't mean you still can't mess up and you still can't make mistakes. Plenty of our teachers, they have great intents. I don't doubt that. But that doesn't mean that they don't unconsciously, put students at disadvantages. That doesn't mean they don't unconsciously, give different support, treat students differently. And that's what we need to be recognizing. And we've brought this up many times about unconscious bias training, but I think that's so serious for our staff to have, for our administration to have, for our board to have. Because again, look around our board, our entire board is white. And while you come here with the best intentions, you simply don't have the experiences that a student of color might have, or that a student from a different marginalized group might have. So good intentions not enough until you act on it, until you reach out to those students and get their perspective.
Weskin, you brought up something that's really important to me as an English teacher. It really went through me when you said it. You said you had read 17 books and only one book by a woman of color. I have long suspected that each of our campuses has a different inventory in the book room. Now, in terms of AP classes, it's possible that some of what's taught may be driven by what the AP test is going to be expecting. But Herman, if you could, I'd like you to take a look at whether we have any consistency across the district in what's available. Did you ever have the opportunity to be exposed to any of these? Black Boy, Red Azalea, Nectar in a Sieve, Things Fall Apart, Bless Me Ultima, The Color Purple. I heard the Caged Birds sing, Blue Moon Highway, Invisible Man, Joy Luck Club. Did you get any?
We read Black Boy, which is by a male of color. And again, my specific mention had been by a woman of color, especially as a woman of color who's passionate about English. That's devastating to not see myself in a future I want to pursue.
Right.
I'm personally we're doing book clubs actually right now in my AP Lit class, and I personally chose the book Things Fall Apart, you know. But a lot of this is work on our own end, and again, the only reason I got to read a book by a woman of color, which was Purple Hibiscus by Chimamanda Adichie, was because our teacher bought copies. And if I hadn't had that teacher, then I would have gone through my entire high school experience without reading a single book by a woman of color.
Well, the book room I was working with was far different, but we need to make sure that access to those materials is universal. So I really appreciate you bringing that up. Thank you.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts, just taking a step back first about the year, right? I think y'all have just been very instrumental in forcing the board to think about things that might not naturally come up, and I really appreciate that. On top of just helping us understand what's going on campus week to week, right? Activities, it's important that we know about that, but I think the true power in what y'all did this year and helped set up is that you did go out and just talk to students and give us really unfiltered feedback about what they said. I think we're a district who has historically struggled at serving students of color, right? Low-income students. You can see it in data, right? I think what you're bringing us is like outside of the data, right? It's the harder part to capture, which is the stories, right? What does that actually look like behind that? So I really appreciate you highlighting this. I know it takes a lot of guts to at the end of the year say, hey, here's what we learned in an unfiltered way. It's just very clear we still have a long way to go. I think we can point to things that are, hey, we've done this and we've invested in this area and it's helping and we can start to see that. But we're nowhere near where we need to be. And I think I just want to say thank you for presenting that in a way that is respectful and helps elicit thought, right? I think the board definitely has more planning to do. Really just want to say thanks. I know we have a longer meeting, so I'll make sure if board members have questions or comments.
I just have one quick one. I got to be in the process of I just got to see them do the work of putting this together. And so I just really appreciate your thoughtfulness in what you chose to present. And thank you again for just your courage in bringing this to us and for listening and looking and being a model of what it looks like to be seeking that input. And I'm excited that Clarabelle is here tonight to be able to see what you've been able to make of this position, and so that she and Tycoon can make this even better next year and do even more and push us even more. And so I appreciate that.
Is there anything else y'all have? All right. Thank you. So we're going to move into item 7A, which is public comment. We do have 4 cards tonight. So I do have to read a statement, so let me load this really quick. Just as a disclaimer, if things are not posted on the agenda for action, we are not allowed to really respond to public comment. But I know the board takes public comment very, very seriously. So we appreciate you coming. Sorry, so this is on the agenda. This is not on the agenda. All right, so we have Leanne from Branham. Yeah, and I can't read that. Hagigi. All right. Yeah.
Good evening.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
you have 3 minutes. Your timer will be up there.
Yep. First, I just wanted to quickly say thank you to the student board members for that really courageous and brave conversation you started. I also wanted to say congratulations to the Teachers of the Year. I know that they've left at this point, and just to say that it's awesome to see some special ed teachers honored this year. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Leanne Hagigi. I'm the special ed department chair at Branham and one of the new teacher mentors for the district. And I came this evening just to speak briefly about special ed. I do want to say that I've seen significant improvement with communication, timeliness, and efficiency of the hiring process compared to last year, and was happy to see the increase in incentive offerings for hard-to-hire fields and hope the improvements continue. Sorry, talking in front of adults always makes me way more nervous than students. I also came as a voice for many of us in special ed to share that we are concerned with the clarity and consistency of communication from the district at every level, in particular with communication from district staff outside of special ed to special ed and between special ed and site administration. As the special ed department chairs in particular, it's been really challenging to provide clear and direct messages to our department members on processes and issues that ultimately affect our students. A couple examples include clarity on resources to help support both general education teachers and students with IEPs in transitioning to the new graduation requirements, and clarity on what the district's vision is for things like co-teaching and inclusion. Additionally, while the purpose of the special ed study is now more transparent, the lack of clear communication from the beginning was concerning to say the least. Without clear, consistent communication across all parties, rumors start to circulate and frustration breeds, ultimately impacting staff morale and satisfaction, which makes it difficult to retain qualified top talent in this hard-to-hire field, as witnessed by the recent large number of district special ed vacancies. I am encouraged to see Darren step forward as our new director and hope that moving forward, there is a strong attempt to improve collaborative, clear, and consistent communication in order for the district to fulfill its mission to attract, retain, and develop top talent so we can better serve our students in so we can better serve our diverse student populations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so our next card is from Julie Lynn.
May I take this off?
Yeah, definitely.
Having some difficulty.
Well, in theory.
Oh, that's right. Logic, right? Okay. Hi, my name is Julie, and I'm a prospect parent. We are here to express our concerns about the AP Mandarin class next year. The school has given us two options. One is to combine the Mandarin 3 together with AP. The other is to taking it off-site. Our Mandarin program has been a successful one. We just have 5 students being recognized for winning the Chinese speech contest. And there is a big gap between 3 and AP as far as language skill goes. The 3 class is taught half in English, but the AP class, the teacher does it totally in Mandarin, creating an immersion environment. During the spring break, Ms. Tong took a group of students to visit China. Most of them are non-native speakers, but at the end of the trip, almost all of them were able to use Mandarin to negotiate with the street vendors. So that's the power of immersion, which will be impossible if there is part of the class that needs to, be instructed in English. As for off-site, because of our block schedule, it's going to fall on Monday, Wednesday, Friday this week, and then Tuesday, Thursday next week. Imagine how complicated the logistics is going to be for a family where both parents works and have more than one kid. And actually right now at Prospect, there are AP classes with small class sizes, one even less than 10. So it doesn't seem that there is a critical number to decide whether an AP can be a separate class or not. The full-time teacher's caseload is 5 periods. And the speculation is these teachers, aside from the AP class, has less than 5. So it's okay for them to have AP as a separate class. In the beginning of the planning process, Ms. Tong has exactly 5 classes, 1 Mandarin 3 and 1 AP. However, the Mandarin 3 has high enrollment, so Ms. Tong and the parents requested the school to split it into 2, which the school agreed under the condition that one of the Mandarin 3 has to be combined with AP class. So it seems like because we only have 1 teacher, so every effort is being made to keep it under, to limit the Mandarin program to 5 periods. Ms. Tong has volunteered to teach 6 periods, but the school has declined. And it doesn't seem to have any other, they don't seem to have any other teachers from other school in the district to cover that extra class. And I think everything seems to point to issues in staffing and budgeting. So that's why we would like to urge the board to look into this. And lastly, I would like to quote the prospect's vision statement. They said that every student has the right to reach his potential in a dynamic and engaging environment. So we urge you to make that vision come true. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have, since there is another part in the mission statement saying that we honor student voice, we have all these wonderful students going to express their concerns and their thoughts. Okay.
Great. And really quick, before they do that, can you have them fill out blue cards, submit them, and then we have to give them 3 minutes each, and we have to cap that discussion to 20 minutes total.
Sorry, I thought it's per topic.
No worries. So if they can do that, we do have another speaker, and while they're doing that, we'll get to the other speaker and then come back to y'all.
Okay, great.
Great. Thank you.
Let's do that. Okay. So you guys all fill out the card.
All right. So we have Diane McKinnon speak about teacher pay raises. And this is not part of CHSD's report, correct? This is separate. Okay, great. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane McKinnon. I'm a second-year teacher at Branham High School. I was hired last year from out of state. I love Branham High School. I was very happy to hear those comments from the student representatives, positive comments about my school. I love it there. Just a couple comments about teacher pay increases. I know that that is being discussed right now. And I just want to bring up a couple points. Increased salary can attract more higher quality job applicants. We do know that. It can increase retention of high quality teachers in the district. It can lower the district's retention costs because it does cost money to hire additional teachers with high turnover. And when salaries are too low, many teachers often need to take on another job, which research states that it increases absenteeism with teachers. Also, I would like to say that retaining teachers is very important within a district, especially high-quality teachers. And I have to tell you, this is my 18th year in teaching, despite my age. I've changed careers midway through my life. So I've been in 6 districts in the last 18 years. And what I see here at Campbell, honestly, is a great district. And I think that Campbell can get to be a premier district in the Silicon Valley area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, so we do have some blue cards, and there seems to be 2 more coming. Great. 3 more coming. Okay. Great. So first up will be Samuel. All right, you're up.
Hi, so I'm from Prospect High School. I'm a freshman right now, and many of us, as discussed before, are willing to take an AP Mandarin class, but because of some problems with enrollment and low enrollment in Prospect itself, the school isn't allowing our Mandarin teacher to take 6 periods and teach an extra AP Mandarin class and fulfill all of her 6 periods. And this is a kind of a big problem to us because many of us really want to take AP Mandarin, and the fact that now that we can't take AP Mandarin in our next year disrupts a lot of our schedules later on, and it's kind of an injustice to our students because we want to push ourselves to go academically harder and take on a challenge, and then the school isn't letting us take it. And it's a little bit sad to see that our school is denying our right to our education, and the fact that we can't push ourselves further than what we can take. And I would like to shorten our time so we can give more time for other students to talk about it. So I'll give it to the next person.
All right. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jamie.
So, hi, as you know, my name is Jamie, and I'm also a freshman at Prospect. I have been, I'm, okay, so I'm also currently enrolled for AP Mandarin Chinese, which has been a problem in our school since currently this year, the AP class is pretty good, and, okay, so basically the problem is that since our Mandarin teacher already has 5 classes and she won't have enough space for an AP Mandarin course, which currently now only has 11 students enrolled, and by our principal, it is the students. There's 2 less students to be able to make a class, so they were thinking about combining a sandwich class of Mandarin 3, AP, and 4 honors, or have us transferred to another school to learn. The problem with transferring us to another school to learn AP Mandarin is that most of us are currently freshmen, and next year we will be sophomores. And to be able to get to another school will be really difficult as we can't drive yet, and our parents are all very busy. So that is the one major concern about transferring students to another school. For the sandwich class of 3 AP and 4, since, as I believe Ms. Liu has addressed, that for AP and 3, it's a totally different level, since as of Mandarin 3, they're still learning the concepts and speaking and culture overall. But in AP, we already the teachers are already talking full Mandarin the whole time. Like, she would barely speak any English. So we would, as AP students, we would want to, excuse me, we would want to be able to learn more, and we would be able to learn more and challenge ourselves if we are in a all Mandarin environment instead of having the teacher speak English and Mandarin, so we can get to know this language better and prepare us more for this AP test. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Daniel.
Hello. As many of you have been told, my name is Daniel, and like everyone else, I'm very concerned about the removal of AP Mandarin from Prospect. As you all know, changing classes causes many schedule conflicts to us students. And to bring up my schedule in particular, due to AP Mandarin being removed from my schedule possibly, or being shifted to period 3, just so I can take AP Mandarin at another school, I've had to take a 0 period, change my elective, and also have an empty period for 5th period, just so I can take AP Mandarin. All these conflicts in my schedule were all because of AP Mandarin either being removed or AP Mandarin being shifted to period 3. I've also had some concerns about communication. Although many of the parents know about this sudden change in classes, I've had to inform every single AP Mandarin student about the sudden change of having to take AP Mandarin at Westmont. And this lack of communication scares me, because what if other classes were to suddenly change on me? I want to have security knowing that the classes I chose mid-year for my next year of school will be the classes I will take. I know things come up and classes will change. Things happen, but I expect an earlier notice, and if that is not given, I expect that what I chose should be what I would be attending next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Jason, you're up next. And after Jason will be Justin and then Annie.
Sorry if I can just use the rest of the time to clarify one thing.
Sorry, we can't
No?
do that.
Okay.
Sorry, we have strict protocols we have to follow by law, so thank you.
Yes, my name is Jason, and I'm a sophomore currently at Prospect. So, as has been discussed previously, our the solutions we were provided is either a combo class or commuting to another school to take a Mandarin class there. The issue with commuting raises a lot of other issues. For example, it could potentially conflict with the other APs I want to take next year as a junior, as well as with after-school activities. Also, a combo class is not a formula for success. AP Mandarin is one of the more challenging courses out there, and in a chaotic combo class, the teacher would not be able to focus enough to help her students succeed. Moreover, there's also issues if Prospect is unable to provide an AP exam next year, not only for students taking Mandarin, but also for native speakers who wish to take the exam, because finding another suitable testing location is extremely difficult issue. And finally, not having an AP program sort of detracts from the Mandarin program as a whole and could potentially dissuade interested Mandarin students. Thank you.
Justin.
I'd like to begin with a quote from the Prospect mission statement, which is, "We encourage empowerment by honoring student voice." The current situation with our AP Chinese language class is we have been offered two options by the administration of our school: to take the course off-site, most likely at Westmont, although possibly Branham or Lee, third period, or to go for a 3-level combo of 4 honors and AP Mandarin at Prospect. Off-site is an extremely bad idea for all of us because we are all very involved in extracurriculars, for example, robotics, sports, etc. I volunteer at Moreland Middle School directly after school, and that would basically, how much time would I have to get there, right? And minimum and collaboration days will also become an extreme hassle for us because during minimum days, the transfer time between second period and third period is 5 minutes. I would not want to be a person trying to tear from Prospect to Westmont in 5 minutes. And alternatively, we would have to leave or get to our classes earlier or later. Collaboration days also appear to be different at each school, which would lead to additional schedule crunches, which could result in us having maybe no time for lunch because we would need to be at Westmont for a class. A combo at Prospect is also extremely bad because 4 honors in AP is already a compromise and is already less than ideal. 3 4 honor in AP together is just too much. Imagine teaching IM 1 through 3 all in the course of 1 hour and 30 minutes. You would have 30 minutes for each class. Is this a way for a successful program or successful students? I don't think so. And essentially, our school has said that we could also wait 1 year, but our vice principal was not offering any guarantees about offering AP Mandarin in what would be my junior year, as I am a freshman right now, and said that they would reconsider the situation when the time came. I've also thought seriously about taking Spanish because this does not seem like a very resolvable situation at the school level, which is why I've just decided to come to the district. And personally, I really think I do not want to take Spanish. I want to take Mandarin, and I will do anything possible to try to get my class. And obviously, AP and 4 honors combo is probably the best possible scenario that we're looking for, but unfortunately, the school will not allow it. So I'm asking for your support in helping us resolve this issue.
Thank you. All right, and Annie.
Hi, my name is Annie, and I am currently a freshman at Prospect High School. So right now, the school has given us two options. So the first option is to combine Mandarin 3, 4 Honor, and AP together. And the second option is to have the AP students go to Westmont to take their AP Mandarin class. And so the first option, I think that it's not a good idea because having Mandarin 3, 4 Honor, and AP together would mean that the teacher would have to split her time between all three classes, and that would be a problem because the class will be too big, and also it will be hard for either like any of the classes to work efficiently because while the teacher is taking care of another class, the other classes might like not like have questions and not be able to have their questions answered. And for the second option to have AP students go to Westmont to take classes, I also think that this is a bad idea because as students, our parents are also busy and a lot of our parents have work. And personally, my mom has cancer and I don't want to like stress her out with having to drive me to Westmont and then back for sports PE or like extracurriculars. So I think that the best solution would probably be to find another teacher. So I know that our Mandarin teacher right now, Miss Tung, she has connections to other licensed teachers who could possibly cover classes here at Prospect. So I think that would be the best solution. And I ask you all to help us resolve this problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as you know, since it's not an agendized item, the board cannot discuss or respond, but I know each board member does take in input very seriously and often leads to future discussions. So thank you so much. If we did, we would have asked them while you were up there. So thank you and really appreciate you coming down today.
Shishi.
So board, we are at a point where I did want to move two things up. One is item 19B, which is around.
We have another speaker.
Sorry?
We have another speaker.
We do not have another speaker on a non-agendized item. We do have a speaker on an agendized item, and I want to bring it up so that they can go on with their evening. And then I want to also bring 17A up, which is the resolution for Indigenous Peoples Day. So 17A and 19B.
So would you like to cover 19B first so the speaker may lead if they so choose?
That's the plan. So,
all right, thank you.
So, great. So 19B, who is introducing, well, actually, who? No, I want to do 19B first. Okay. If that's okay. So does someone want to introduce it, or do you want to do public comment first, then do introductions? What's better?
Usually you do public comment first.
Okay, great.
And
so
then-
Jeff, you're up. Thank you, Matthew.
Hello. Thank you. My name is Jeff Bangford, and I've been producing theater at Westmont High School for 26 years. I have dedicated my adult life to the advancement of standards and excellence in theater in the high school arena. The performing arts are a critical part of any curriculum. This ancient art form called theater is still alive today because it continues to enrich us all as members of a communicative society. The state of California has developed and implemented a set of standards for the visual and performing arts, and the CTE pathway standards for arts, media, and entertainment are even more rigorous than the state's. Evidence shows that an arts education boosts lagging student test scores. Teaching the arts enhances a student's critical thinking skills and strengthens their ability to synthesize, communicate, and express their ideas. The performing arts are a vital part of our students' standard-based education, which helps them succeed beyond the test, enhance their critical thinking skills, and strengthen their ability to synthesize, communicate, and express their ideas. Tonight, you are considering adding other electives such as AVID, Leadership, and Junior ROTC to the graduation requirements already designated as that for CTE and Visual and Performing Arts. Where is this idea coming from? What is the rationale for this proposal? In a desire for transparency, why has this suggestion not been brought to the public, or at least to the teachers at our sites, or perhaps to a TLC meeting for discussion and input? I value these other courses, and I have great respect for my colleagues who teach these courses. But I do not understand how their courses, these additional electives, can be placed within the same category as a CTE Visual and Performing Arts pathway. This proposal doesn't make any sense to me, it doesn't make any sense to my Visual and Performing Arts colleagues, and it devalues the academic worth and gravitas that designates our 4-year CTE VAPA course pathway. For the sake of the visual and performing arts and all that we have done to move our programs forward thus far, I ask you to not approve this amendment. The rigor required in CTE VAPA courses has nothing to do with the curriculum of any of the other proposed additional courses. In an effort to create flexibility, this will, in my opinion, negatively impact the CTE Visual and Performing Arts, which are arguably amongst the flagships of our district. Why would we dilute them and in the process create an unnecessary conflict for students? This baffles me. I hope that you'll continue to advocate for visual and performing arts. VAPA teachers feel like we're on a constant battle with other electives to maintain enrollment in our own courses. Adding other options to this graduation requirement simply negatively impacts that enrollment. Please reconsider this illogical proposal. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we're now in consideration of action item 19B.
So, trustees, it's under Ed Services, but I'm going to jump in because this is one of those things that really I got the ball rolling with you all last spring, and so I said, "Oh, here, Mom, let me just get in on this one." So, since the new graduation requirements were introduced and passed last spring, I have had some feedback from parents, teachers, and principals that they are very troubled by the CTE requirement because we don't have very many options for CTE at some of our schools. Westmont has a lot of options, for example, with ag, for example, but Branham, on the other hand, doesn't have very many. Now, we are trying to work to create more CTE opportunities around the district, but in the absence of those, there has been some concern about giving kids options. And I think at the last board meeting this was discussed, this idea of trying to provide students with more options. On the issue of taking enrollment from a VAPA 4-year pathway, I do not believe that this change would do that. As it is, the new graduation requirements require students to take at least 1 year of VAPA, and if they take 2 years of VAPA, there is no CTE requirement. So as I think it through, if I'm a student, I take the first and second years of the pathway, there's no advantage, the change in the CTE requirement, that doesn't discourage me in any way from still taking year number 3. And in fact, the change in graduation requirements requires that every one of our students have at least 1 year of VAPA. The old requirements, you could have graduated with never having any VAPA. So the intent is not to devalue art in any way, but the intent was to try and respond to these different feedback that I received again from parents, teachers, and principals. I think if I didn't want to be transparent, I didn't have to send a letter to the staff and let them know this was discussed tonight. But I did that. I'm more than happy to hear the discussion amongst you all. The other part of the change suggested that the requirement on language other than English be one that is waived for those students who can fulfill the equivalent for UCCSU through other means. And additionally, I recommended some language that corrects, I think, the impression that some folks got from one of the opening paragraphs, because it uses the term A to G very often. And truly, we still are not an A to G graduation district. To be that, we would have to say students were passing these courses with C's, and we're not saying that. So I didn't want to give that a false impression, so that's why I am recommending some language changes.
So before we get to the discussion of the CTE requirement, I wanted to make a comment on the A to G language and how we, and I think you know I've said this many times, I think that when we use the terminology college and career, I think people stop listening after they hear the word college, and I think we're not really sending the right message about why we're here. And I had the opportunity to attend a couple of different eighth grade parent information nights at different schools, and I listened to principals give the explanation as to why we've made this change in the graduation requirements. And one principal said, well, we're doing this so that we better meet the A through G requirements. And then another principal said, we're doing this so that students have options, or have, don't have a, they have more options for their post-secondary career. And I think when we keep talking about A through G and college and career, I just don't think we're sending the right message. And so I'd like to offer in the first paragraph, or the second paragraph, where we talk about beginning with the class of 2020, rather than talking about more aligned to college and contemporary workplace expectations. To me, what this is really about is to prepare and train in the necessary skills to have the ability to participate in society fully. And I think when we talk about it in that perspective, I think it helps connect the dots for why kids are taking 4 years of English, why kids are taking 3 years of math. You're not taking 3 years of math so that you get the content. You're taking 3 years of math so that you learn how to solve problems. I took a lot of math. I took a lot of advanced math. I have not solved a differential equation since I took it in college over 30 years ago. But I could figure out how to solve a differential equation today. And I don't think that we're making these connections for our students as to why we're doing this. So I'd like to offer that as a first language, and I think that there's a copy of some of this if you guys want to look at it.
And President Gallagher, I have no concerns or objections to the language that Member Brown has offered. I welcome it.
So, other thoughts? I could jump in if you want.
I have other thoughts, go for it.
Yeah.
All right. So, sorry, Linda, go ahead.
But no, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think so. A year ago, or whenever, I don't know exactly how long. It was a year ago. We made a move to do what we'd actually done in 2014 by default, right? Which was to make sure that kids were going to have more options to fully integrate into society and take advantage of things when they graduate. And so I am concerned about, I think there was kind of some hubbub created, I think, with the original communication, because I think it confused what is really happening here. I think that by allowing kids to test out of a language, if they meet the requirements that the state has set, that gives kids a lot more flexibility to actually take more VAPA classes, right? So I don't want that to get lost, because that's going to be the case for lots of our students who still need units, but are able to pass out of, taking Spanish 1, Spanish 2, or Mandarin 1, Mandarin 2, or whatever it is, because it's their native tongue, right? And then secondly, I don't know if I fully agree that less kids are going to take VAPA classes if we allow them, allow the kids who are taking 4 years of AVID to count that under that section. It's just, I don't think the math makes sense there. These are kids who, AVID is a very important program. R2C is a very important program. It is very specialized. It's a very small number of kids. I don't think that is going to contribute to less kids taking these classes. I actually think more kids will take these classes because of this. So I'm in full support. Stacy, I like that language, and those are my thoughts.
Well, I'm not. Yeah, and it's no secret to those of you on the board that I am very passionate about both of these curricular areas, VAPA and CTE. And I think it's great that VAPA and CTE are now requirements for all students. However, I think the puzzling thing here is that students in AVID Leadership and ROTC would now qualify for VAPA and CTE credit if we do this. And the standards for those classes there's no connection, there's no alignment with the standards for VAPA or CTE. They're completely different animals. There's nothing in the curriculum that aligns with CTE or visual and performing arts. AVID students can get general elective credit, so can leadership students. ROTC is often taken in lieu of physical education, general elective credit. It's just hard for me to see the connection here, and I think that's what some of the teachers who have written into us this afternoon are struggling with. I heard from the Lee theater teacher that 3 theater teachers at Lee now follow a CTE-aligned curriculum, and I think those students are probably the better for that. I heard from a visual arts teacher. I understand that all schools were instructed to cut the VAPA programs by 0.4, which is exactly what happened across the district, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I'd like to know. And that was to meet budget needs. She would like to know what is the priority of our district. We know that the arts connect students to school who would otherwise sometimes feel that they really have no place to belong. But I think the biggest problem for me is the disconnect of just sort of lumping those 3 other courses, which have no curricular alignment at all with the standards for CTE or VAPA, into the same pot. It just, I don't understand it.
Well, as a point of clarification, though, if you look at the proposed language and on the second page, the number 7 on the second page, it allows the specialized classes in lieu of CTE. It doesn't allow them to switch out VAPA. They can't switch out VAPA. They can only switch out CTE.
Well, I'm not sure that I'm thrilled about that part either.
I just wanted to make sure that was no.
Yeah.
And there was no directive for every site to cut VAPA by 0.4.
That was just based on how the schedule got developed, and it was based upon demand for the classes. Is that what caused the...
Well, I think, as I mentioned at a previous board meeting, we are being very rigorous in our staffing process this year because we know that we are facing some fiscal challenges. And I very much want to try and, we heard tonight, one speaker talked about the importance of teacher salary. I know that. I'm very sensitive to that. And we have to balance that. And then we have the students here who are advocating for a class for Mandarin, and that would be, I'd love to say we can do that, but we're going to have budget workshop next week, and you're going to see how we're going to have a lot of competing interests amongst ourselves in the next few weeks. And there is no right answer always. There's not an easy answer necessarily.
May I ask a question about the transcript? If CTE has certain curricular standards that these other three courses cannot satisfy, then can we legitimately, on a transcript, give CTE credit for AVID, for example?
No, we're not giving them CTE credit on the transcript. We're allowing this course to be used.
A waiver.
Yes, it's like a waiver. We're not giving CTE credit.
So I think what might be getting lost is when we initially, as a board, decided, hey, let's move to something that's a little more rigorous and has higher expectations. We went above and beyond and said,
I
hey,
didn't.
Yeah, sorry. So when four of us did, and said, for all whatever the reasons were, right? We said, hey, wouldn't it also be cool if we added CTE as an additional thing on top of what the state is really asking us to do and what is the norm in society, right? And we said, let's do a third year of science as well, right? I think in the implementation of doing that, we realized that there's a lot of scheduling conflicts, right? So went above and beyond what the state is asking. There's kids who are getting slammed up against this reality of like, hey, you don't offer enough of this. Here's a couple more options for you to opt out. You still have to take a year of APA. There's no way out of that. Hey, and you can also opt out of language. So you can take more of APA, right? I think this just makes sense. It's readjusting based on what's happening on the ground for kids.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do we have enough CTE courses right now for all students to take a year of CTE? See Cheryl saying no at all of our
Well, at Branham,
campuses?
you definitely don't.
At Branham, we don't.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's very uneven. So Westmont has a large amount of choice to it. Branham does not have very much. Lee does not have very much. Those schools in particular. Again, we're trying to expand those kinds of offerings, like start a new biomed at Del Mar. I know that Cheryl has really been sort of constantly pushing us about what are you going to do for Branham. So so like today is there? No.
So in that case, I think I'm thinking about if I'm a student, what are my options? I have these courses that are trying to prepare me with really rigorous instruction. I'm being pushed to be an even better problem solver through extra science, through math. I have English every year, and I want to explore something. And there's some wiggle room in my schedule. This seems to provide a little bit more if I happen to speak a second language at home and I can opt out of that. Currently, I think the direction of getting all of our students to do CTE, I am all for that. However, if we currently do not have what we need in place for students to meet this expectation, I don't think that that's fair because we're not there yet. And so if we have students still taking VAPA, if I'm a student who wants to do the CTE VAPA pathway, I can still do that. If I want to do AVID, I can do that. It makes sense to me in terms of setting our students up for success with an expectation we can as a district prepare them and meet and give them a little bit potentially more flexibility so that they can get really high rigorous learning and have a little bit more space depending on what options are available at each campus to explore what they are passionate about. I don't see this taking away options from our students. And so I'm in support.
I was wondering what our student board member thought, because you've been passing through the graduation requirements personally. Not necessarily new ones, but.
As Dr. Bravo mentioned, at Lee, there's not a lot of options for CTE. Like, I was actually struggling to think of any, so I was glad that Kiki asked that. But I know for, like, me personally, I had 7 classes my first 2 years. I've had 6 classes these 2 years, and I still, like, I'm a little bummed that I didn't get to take, journalism or foods or something. Like I didn't have any wiggle room and I was already like taking extra classes. And, that was a choice. I took 4 years of leadership. But I do agree that like it's obviously like these CTE classes are very important, but there's other passions that students have that we should encourage them to pursue because, maybe I wouldn't have had room to take, say, leadership for 1 year if I had to get like another CTE class or something. And like I didn't have enough room basically at all. So I definitely agree that this doesn't seem like a negative change to me. I think it's giving our students more options. And the second thing I want to say is regardless of what we decide, an issue that was brought up to me by a student that is a first-generation college student and her family is that these changes in the graduation requirements aren't being communicated well enough to parents, especially, parents that haven't gone to college or parents that went to college in a different country, that might be immigrants. And that's, so students aren't aware of all the options and they're not getting that support from their parents to help figure out what their, what courses they should take in order to graduate. So I think it's very important that whatever conclusion we come to, we figure out how we're going to best communicate that to students and parents.
I appreciate.
To your point about communication, whether I'm on board with this or not, I would like to have seen a meeting with the VAPA and CTE staff, teachers, to discuss this and have some back and forth, get some input, hammer out any lack of understanding around it. And I think that the 0.4 reductions that have occurred have fueled a certain nervousness. And then when this showed up rather suddenly, that nervousness is exacerbated. So again, it just keeps coming back around to communication. And I can't stress enough that we can head off a lot of hurt feelings and misunderstandings if we ramp up our commitment to communication.
And board, if I might, given that it's 8 and we have not started presentations, I do want to just, I feel tonight, if we get to points where we think we've made our minds up, we should vote sooner than later.
So if I were to vote right now on this, I would vote no.
Okay.
And the reason is very simple. I think this is a reasonable proposal, but I think it's the wrong solution to the problem. And I think that as long as we keep doing these kind of Band-Aid type things to the real problem here, we're not going to sit down and solve the real problem, which is a doozy of problem, and that is the block schedule. It just doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility in being able to pick different types of courses. If you think about, you get 6 classes a year, like 4 of them are pre-programmed for you, maybe 5, right? And you get 1 period to try to meet all of these requirements. I just can't understand how we are going to possibly be able to offer all of this flexibility in our programming when we have this schedule problem. And my very first night on the board, the parents at Branham came to talk about marching band PE. And we did marching band PE as the solution to the same problem, that these kids want to do marching, want to do the music progression for 4 years, and there's just no room in the schedule for it. So I don't think that changing the policy, I think when you start tweaking policies like this, it might sound all good tonight, and we might be thinking, okay, well, we really don't think it's going to have a real impact, and then you change the policy, and then all these unforeseen things come up. So changing the policy is not the way I would want to solve this particular issue.
That's a good question on block scheduling. Because, so, fun fact, my first board meeting ever, I gathered 1,000 signatures from students because I hated the block schedule and we were moving to it. And I came here and yelled at the board. And we got media. It was a lot of fun. We lost. But I'm actually really glad we lost because I ended up teaching under a block schedule and it gives you a little more time. And I don't know if changing back to 50 minutes.
I'm not advocating changing back to 50 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just saying is that all you have is this block to fit all of these things into. I think that we have to figure out ways that we can put things on a different schedule. So, for example, I've had math teachers tell me that some kids in math, they don't do well doing math every other day for 100 minutes. It's better to give them 50 minutes every day. That's the structure that they need for math. If you had an opportunity to do some of that in the schedule, then you have space to offer different electives, different CTE classes. And I think that we also, the other piece of this to me is that, Branham is so desperate for CTE, they're so desperate for business stuff out there, that they had me do an after-school club, right? That's all that they had available to just get something for the kids to do. So we got to solve that problem too. We have to get more course offerings at all the schools so that that kids have the choices. Their jobs in high school are to explore different things that they might be interested in. Project Lead the Way is a terrific CTE pathway because kids come in and they can discover, do I really want to go to become an engineer? They learn that in high school. So we have to do more of this, and that's what I think we have to start focusing our efforts for. The problem that we have today with that you're trying to solve this way through this policy, I think can be solved by just basically having a robust waiver policy so that any kid that is struggling to fulfill the new graduation program requirements has a mechanism to be waived, and you take it on an individual case. This should be it's like an 80-20 rule. This is what it is. Everybody should be aspiring for this, and we're going to have some issues during ramp up while we're building capacity of more CTE programs at all the sites and things like that. So while we're doing this, if we have students that are truly struggling with meeting some of the requirements, then have a waiver/exception process that we can do for the first couple of years until we resolve the bigger root cause issues that are causing this.
If I could, I'd just like to point out a couple of things. I'm glad you brought up Project Lead the Way, because it's something that didn't get listed as one of the specialized courses, which I should have. And a Project Lead the Way teacher contacted me after my letter and says, does this mean that Project Lead the Way will count too? Because at a place like Lee, for example, or Branham, we have Project Lead the Way classes that are teaching engineering, but because of the state's rules on credentialing, we cannot count those Project Lead the Ways as CTE. So here again, I feel that yes, it's true. We're working on it. We are trying to help move the system so that the credential of the teacher isn't the determiner about. So yeah, you could have.
So it's a credentialing problem, because one of the things when we were working on the CTE task force, we came to find out that the Project Lead the Way curriculum, I guess, satisfies the CTE requirements.
It does.
It's a credentialing issue.
It does if the teacher has a certain credential.
Got it.
But when they don't, it doesn't. So I think that this, I understand what you're saying, Trustee Brown. As it is, actually, the policy already has a waiver process. It says, while all students will follow the program outline on a case-by-case basis, the principal may adjust individual student programs to meet specific personal and educational need. So I think that that's built in. I think when you talk about the difficulty of high school, it has a lot to do with 6 periods. And as it is, we offer students the option for 7. And
It's 7 o'clock in the morning.
yes, but as I alluded to earlier, that costs money. And do the kids deserve it? Absolutely. Would I do anything to give my son what he needed to be happy and healthy and educated? I sure would. But that is something that we go beyond our obligation to do 7 periods, but we do it because we're trying to support students. Could we have every student doing a 7-period day? We could, but that would be an expense. So while I totally agree that many of our students find their schedules very impacted and often don't have as much choice as I would like, I think to deal with, I totally believe that policy is a blunt instrument. Really, when we get the best teachers in classes and the best principals in schools, they're going to make 99% of the good stuff happen. And policy is a blunt instrument, but it still has purpose. And I think in order to ensure that our students matriculate and we have some flexibility, I would urge you to consider this policy.
So a couple thoughts. One, we used to have no VAPA requirement whatsoever, so I think that having a year is a huge change. Two, I think one of the most dysfunctional organizations in the entire state of California is the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. I think that they have spent way too many months in Colorado on vacation in some way, shape, or form, because if you go through, it's a labyrinth. If you go through the special ed credentialing and try to decipher it, it's like, are you kidding me? It'd be easier to build a supercomputer. The second thing I think is that I think courses like leadership are huge. I think it's hard to have a, quote, rigorous curriculum regarding, but I think that they bring skills to the fore and develop those in our students that are really hard to replicate in any other venue. In fact, I would say a lot of leadership is, in fact, a form of a theater art, a practice theater art. You can disagree with me, you're welcome to, but I know that those kids have a lot of things to go do to try to make stuff happen for the betterment of the entire school. So I'm supportive of this. I think last time we spoke, one of the things I point out is I want our kids to be able to count credits and units and grades for things beyond our walls. Because the number of courses to qualify and get accepted into a UC, the quote rigor, I think rigor is a perfect word. I would add mortis to it. Because I don't think that the UC requirements actually serve a purpose other than to be a rude, crude filter. And they actually do a disservice to our higher education and our students. But we're stuck with them. We can't change those. So I'm going to be supportive of this. I don't think it's an ultimate solution, but I think we need to put this Band-Aid in place till we can get more of the root cause issues addressed. And so I'm supportive of it tonight for that reason. And I love the theater arts. Came to love them later on. I never, ever took them. I have a voice that, you're a monotone. Please quit singing. So, and I've been to some of your productions, and they're outstanding, and they've always been outstanding without the increased, quote, requirements because of the passion you bring, and I think that's the key thing. So I'm going to be supportive of it. I'd like to move approval with the changes to the wording in the second paragraph that Stacy brought to the fore.
Just before, Linda, I just want to make sure I understand the motion. Just in this paragraph, correct? Because the
Yes.
stuff on this other pages.
I have a comment, and then I had two other edits.
Okay, but really quick, I will second it like that. I'll second it like the way he made the motion.
So, the other edit that I had, which is a simple one, is that there's two different types of high school course requirements in this. And so I'm just suggesting that we put a header in where the continuation high school course requirements come in, so it'd be easier to understand and read the policy.
So I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
And then on number 7, I think that my only concern with listing and saying such as but not limited to is that you actually kind of do limit it to when you put it in a policy like this. So I might suggest that the or other specialized content areas as designated by the superintendent might be enough, and that will remove some of the prescriptiveness of this, and that will allow us to be able to, and as long as this is well communicated, be able to say, oh yeah, sure, Project Lead the Way can count as this, and this can count as this, and that can count as that. So I don't know that we actually have to list any of the courses that could be considered. I think it's enough to just say we've had special, just describing what it is.
So let me just make sure I understand. So in 7, it would say 10 credits of career technical education, CTE, or other specialized content areas as designated by the superintendent, unless 20 or more credits of visual or performing arts have been earned, period. That's
Yes.
where you'd stop it.
Right. That's where I'd stop.
Okay, I accept that as a friendly amendment.
I withdraw my second. The problem is it's a slippery slope. This helps. I think it makes sense to outline, because future superintendents, super boards might be just like, oh yeah, well.
Okay, I can live without it, because such as doesn't limit it, and.
But it shows the board's intent at this point in time, right? Like, I fear for 20 years from now being like, oh, well, these kids took this class, and then we get
Everything.
right back to the highest achievement gap in the Bay Area, right? Like, that's my biggest fear, and I think this specifically
So
helps.
I would argue that we shouldn't need this amendment to the CTE requirement 20 years from now. We shouldn't need it 3 years from now. We should be able to resolve some of these issues so that there are a plethora of CTE choices for students to make in the district and be able to meet the requirement. So,
In the meantime, I have a question about the waiver concept. I'm really torn about that because we are a people business. We're not a factory, and I've always felt like we ought to have more flexibility. At the same time, if the principals are put in the position of granting waivers on a case-by-case basis, there's going to be a tremendous amount of pressure for these waivers unless there are some guidelines around the waiver process. Do we have any?
We're actually working on the guidelines, and so we've met with the principals. I've met with the director of curriculum and instruction, so we're outlining some of the guidelines that are clear. I'll give you one example. What if a student, newcomer from Mexico, 11th grader, will they have the space in their schedule to fulfill the requirements? And so we're being very clear. So we're looking at those guidelines and outlining them clearly so we have a blueprint that we can follow and or adjust.
So there is an open motion on the floor by Matthew, which is to pass this with 3 changes based on the edits that Stacy provided. One is in the second paragraph to include the blue underlined text. Second is on item 7.
No, I withdraw that one. I'll skip that. Leave the text as is on 7, but pick up the one on 9 of the header, continuation high school course requirements.
Okay. So it's a motion with paragraph 2 and item 9.
all right, so
I'll second that.
let me add, so if we leave the courses which are to be considered, then I'd like to add, remove the college and career readiness skills and replace it with something along the lines of workforce preparation. I want to get us out of the business of calling things college and career.
I don't have an objection to that if you're okay with that. I mean, it's just a word dance.
I mean, the problem is, like, these courses do help kids for college readiness, right? I don't know if we need to hide the ball on that.
I think that, and I don't know if the students are going to concur on this, but I think that students are feeling so much pressure right now, and to go straight from high school into a 4-year college, that if they don't get into Berkeley, they feel like they failed. And I met a whole bunch of them in my class at Branham that feel that way, and I hear that from parents, and I hear that from other students, that they're stressed out, they're depressed, they're anxious, because we keep telling them, the message that we keep telling them, and the message that the parents are getting is, success looks like going to a UC. And I just think we have to be very mindful of that message everywhere we possibly can.
Second. I'll just second it. Let's go. All right. Any other discussion?
What's the motion now?
So the motion is to approve item 19B with 3 changes. In paragraph 2, there's new language that is highlighted in blue in front of you. Second, on number 7, it is to change college and career readiness to workforce preparation. And on item 9, it's continuation high school course requirements as a header. The motion was made by Matthew, a second by me. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
All right. Motion passes 4-1. And we're going to move into
17.
item 17A.
Or 17B.
Sorry, yes, item 17B. So, Stacy, you said you had, worked on some language. Do we have that?
Yes.
Okay. Where?
Should be in your stack of handouts.
Great. So here's my suggestion. Kind of like we did last time, there was a resolution. I would like to take a 10-minute break because it's around that time anyways. Read over this, be prepared to talk about it, and then we'll come back at 8:40 p.m. Is that okay with the board? All right. Thank you.